My son and my daughter-in-law sent me to prison for 3 years for a lie I never committed. They blamed me for the car accident that made my daughter-in-law lose the baby, something that was never my intention. They thought this old black woman would stay silent, helpless, and forgotten behind bars, but they had no idea what was coming. To this day, I can still hear my daughter-in-law's voice in the courtroom, cold as ice. A life for a life. My son nodded beside her, whispering, "Disappear for the good of our family." From the witness stand, my daughter-in-law smiled with contempt. "You owe us this, mother-in-law." Every word was calculated. Every tear was rehearsed. They painted me as the monster who destroyed their unborn grandchild's future. All of it just to keep what was mine by right. I rejected every visitation request for 3 years. I didn't want to see their faces. I didn't want to hear one more lie. My name is Helen. I'm 64 years old, and I spent 5 years of my life in a state prison for a crime I never committed. Today I'm here, free, trying to rebuild what's left of my life. And I feel like I need to tell this story, not just to vent, but because I know there are other women out there going through similar situations, being deceived by the very people they love most. This happened 7 years ago, in 2018, when I still believed I had a real family. I had been a widow for 3 years, still grieving my husband, Robert, who died of a sudden heart attack with no warning. We had built everything together: a beautiful house in Stone Mountain, Georgia, a decent savings account, investments. Robert was a real estate broker, and I worked as an administrative manager at a private school. We were married for 35 years, raised our only son, Terrence, and I truly believed I had done everything right in life. After Robert died, I threw myself into work so I wouldn't lose my mind. I woke up at 6 in the morning, had my coffee alone at that table that was far too big for just one person, and drove off to my appointments for the day. On weekends, I visited my younger sister, Joyce, or stayed home tending to the garden Robert loved so much. I wasn't really living, I was just existing, you know? Terrence was always a difficult boy. Not bad, but he always wanted things the easy way. As a child, he didn't like studying and preferred playing video games. As a teenager, he fell in with some friends Robert and I didn't really approve of, but he was stubborn. He managed to finish college because we paid for everything and stayed on top of him, but I never once saw that boy truly put effort into anything. After graduating in business administration, he jumped from job to job, always with some excuse about how the boss didn't appreciate him or how his co-workers were jealous. Robert used to say Terrence needed to grow up, that one day reality would hit him, but it never did. At 32, he met Vanessa at a friend's party. She was pretty, I'll admit that. Light brown skin, perfectly styled curly hair, manicured nails, designer clothes. She worked as a receptionist at a dental clinic, Skogi, but the way she dressed and spoke, you'd swear she was a high-level executive somewhere. When Terrence introduced her to me, I felt a chill in my stomach. It wasn't some mother-in-law jealousy, it was pure instinct. Vanessa greeted me with a smile that never reached her eyes. You know the kind. And during the lunch I prepared to welcome her, she stayed glued to her phone the whole time, barely touched the food. "I'm on a diet, Miss Helen," she said, with that fake little smile. "I'm not the type to judge people by appearances, but there are some people you look at and just know something doesn't add up." They got married 6 months later, in a small wedding that I paid for because Terrence was between jobs yet again. Vanessa wanted a big celebration, but I told her I could only help with a simple ceremony. She frowned, but she accepted it. After the wedding, they moved into a rented apartment on the other side of the city. I thought that was for the best. Let them build their own life. But not even 3 months went by before Terrence started calling me asking to borrow money. First it was to pay the rent because his boss had delayed his paycheck. Then it was for the car payment, because Vanessa had lost her job and they were struggling. There was always an excuse. And I, like the foolish mother I was, helped. I took money from my hard-earned savings, from the inheritance Robert had left me, and transferred it to his account. "It's just until we get back on our feet, Mom," he said. "We'll pay you back. Don't worry." A lie. They never paid back a single cent. A year after the wedding, Vanessa got pregnant. Terrence called me, thrilled, saying I was going to be a grandmother. I'll admit, I was happy. I thought a baby might bring responsibility into my son's life, finally make him wake up. I started knitting little blankets, bought a beautiful crib, set aside some of Terrence's baby things I had kept with care. But then the hints started. "Mom, we were thinking, that house of yours is so big and you live there all alone." Terrence's voice on the phone had a tone I had never heard before. "Wouldn't it be better for us to move in with you? Vanessa's pregnant, she'll need help, and the apartment is way too small for a baby." I hesitated. It wasn't that I didn't want to help, but that house was mine and Robert's. Every corner held a memory of us. The idea of sharing that space with Vanessa, who barely hid her dislike for me, made me uneasy. But I looked at Robert's photo on the wall and thought he would want me to help our son, so I agreed. That's when my hell began, though I didn't know it yet. They moved in on a Tuesday in March. Terrence brought very little with him, but Vanessa filled the house with her clutter. She immediately started complaining about the decor, said the house looked old and needed to be modernized. She even had the nerve to ask me to remove the photos of me and Robert from the living room because they made the place feel heavy. I said no, that house was mine, and my husband's photos would stay wherever I wanted them. She pouted, but didn't push it that time. In the first few months, I tried to make it work. I cooked for the three of us, cleaned, kept everything organized. But Vanessa always had a complaint. The food had no salt. The house felt cold. I made too much noise early in the morning. I vacuumed and disturbed her while she was nauseous. Complaint after complaint. And Terrence, my son, my only son, never once stood up for me. He stayed silent, or worse, he agreed with her. "Mom, she's pregnant. You have to be patient." Patient. That word started to make me sick. Vanessa's pregnancy kept progressing. And along with it, the disrespect inside my own home. By the 5th month, she had already turned the guest room into a true palace for the baby. She had Terrence paint the walls a light yellow, bought outrageously expensive furniture that I know they didn't have the money to pay for, and started treating me like I was their maid. "Miss Helen, could you wash these baby clothes? I can't have contact with chemical products." "Miss Helen, could you make that roasted chicken of yours for today? I'm craving it." "Miss Helen, could you sweep the garage? Terrence is busy." I did everything because deep down, I still hoped that when the baby was born, they would change, they would grow up, they would value me. What an illusion. Terrence was hardly ever home. He got a job as a salesman at a car dealership, but he was always going out with friends after work. He came back late, smelling of alcohol, and went straight to the bedroom. Vanessa complained, but only to me. "Your son doesn't pay attention to me, Miss Helen. I'm pregnant here, alone, and he's out on the streets." As if I could do anything about it. I tried talking to Terrence a few times, but he shut me down. "Mom, don't interfere in my marriage. Vanessa exaggerates. You know how dramatic she is." It was on a Saturday in July, 7 months into her pregnancy, that everything changed. I had gone grocery shopping, one of those big monthly trips. I filled 2 carts, paid over $300, all with my money, of course. When I got home, Vanessa was sitting on the living room couch, my living room, watching TV and eating popcorn. She didn't even get up to help me. Terrence went to play basketball with his friends. she said without taking her eyes off the screen. I carried the bags in by myself, put everything away by myself, and when I finished, I went into the living room. "Vanessa, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She turned off the TV and looked at me with that bored expression that deeply irritated me. "About what, Miss Helen?" "About this situation. You've been living in my house for 4 months. I pay the bills, buy the food, clean, cook, and you don't even say thank you. I'm not your maid." She laughed. I swear to God, she laughed right in my face. "You're complaining about helping your own son. What kind of mother are you?" I felt my blood boil. "I'm not complaining about helping. I'm complaining about being disrespected in my own house." Vanessa stood up, rubbed her pregnant belly, and walked toward me. "Look, Miss Helen, if you don't want us here, just say it. We'll leave, and you'll never see your grandchild again." That was the first time she used the baby as a weapon against me. That night, when Terence got home, Vanessa had already prepared the ground. I heard her crying in the bedroom, telling him that I had been aggressive with her, that I had yelled, that I said I didn't want them there. All lies. Terence came into the kitchen, where I was washing dishes, and stared at me with a coldness I had never seen before. "Mom, did you threaten my wife?" "I didn't threaten anyone, Terence. I just asked for respect." "Respect? You're demanding respect from a pregnant woman. What kind of grandmother are you going to be?" I dropped the sponge into the sink and turned to him. "Terence, you know very well that I've never done anything wrong to her. This house is mine. I work, I pay the bills, and the two of you live off me without even saying thank you. I just want a little consideration." He scoffed. "If it's that bad, we'll leave. But don't count on us after that, and you can forget about meeting your grandchild." He walked out of the kitchen and slammed the bedroom door. I stood there, alone, my hands shaking, trying to understand how things had come to that point. How my son, the boy I carried in my arms, whom I raised, whom I loved unconditionally, had become such a cruel stranger. 2 weeks later, the accident happened. It was a Thursday afternoon, around 3 o'clock. I had left work early because I had a dentist appointment. When I got home, Vanessa was there lying on the couch, watching TV as usual. I greeted her, she barely responded, and went to my room to change clothes. About 20 minutes later, I heard her calling me. Miss Helen, can you come here?" I went downstairs and found her standing, holding her belly. "I'm feeling a strange pain. I think we'd better go to the hospital." My heart started racing. "I'll get the car keys." We went to my car, a Toyota Camry I'd had for 6 years, always well taken care of. I helped her into the passenger seat, fastened her seatbelt, and started driving to the nearest hospital, about 20 minutes from the house. Vanessa was groaning softly, saying the pain was getting worse. I tried to stay calm, but I was nervous. I took the main avenue. It was all clear, no traffic. That's when we went through a light that had just turned green. Out of nowhere, a red car came speeding from the right and slammed into the side of my car, right into the passenger door where Vanessa was sitting. The impact was violent. I heard the sound of crushing metal, breaking glass, and Vanessa screaming. My car spun, hit the curb, and stopped. Everything happened in seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I was dizzy. The airbag had exploded in my face, and all I could hear was Vanessa crying and screaming, "My baby! My baby!" The ambulance arrived quickly, and so did the police. They pulled us out of the car, examined me, said I was fine, just a few scratches. But Vanessa was taken straight to the hospital. I went along, desperate, praying that she and the baby would be okay. At the hospital, I stayed in the waiting room while the doctors treated her. I called Terence and told him what had happened. He hung up on me and said he was on his way. When he arrived, he looked at me with a hatred I will never forget. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what had happened. He went straight to talk to the doctors. 2 hours later, a doctor came out and delivered the news. Vanessa had lost the baby. The impact of the crash had caused a placental abruption, and there was nothing they could do. I felt my legs give out. My grandchild, my first grandchild, dead because of an accident that I had absolutely no fault in. The days that followed were the worst of my life. Vanessa stayed hospitalized for 3 days, and Terence never left her side. I tried to visit. I brought flowers. I wanted to talk. But he stopped me at the bedroom door. "Mom, it's better if you don't come in. Vanessa doesn't want to see you." "Terence, I need to talk to her, to apologize, even without being at fault. You're not at fault. You were driving the car, Mom. My son died because you weren't careful." That broke me. "Terence, it wasn't my fault. That car was speeding. The guy ran the red light. The police filed a report. Everything's documented." He pushed me out into the hallway. "I don't want to hear your excuses. You killed my son. Now get out of here and leave me alone." I went back home, shattered. I called my sister Joyce and told her everything through tears. She tried to comfort me, said Terence was in shock, that with time he would understand, but deep in my chest, I felt that something had changed forever. When Vanessa was discharged, they came back to the house. I had prepared dinner, cleaned the bedroom, tried to do everything to show that I cared, but when they walked in, Vanessa passed right by me without saying a word and went straight to the bedroom. Terence stayed in the living room, staring at me with that hard look. "Mom, we need to talk." I sat down on the couch, my hands shaking. "Go ahead, son. Vanessa can't take staying here anymore. Every time she looks at you, she remembers our dead son. We're going to look for another place to live." I felt a tightness in my chest, but at the same time, a strange sense of relief. Maybe it really was better this way, each of us in our own space, and with time, we'd sort things out. "All right, Terence. I understand. You can stay as long as you need until you find a place." He gave a bitter smile. "We already found one, but there's a problem. We don't have the money for the deposit and first month's rent. You're going to have to help. Always money. Always me having to reach into my own pocket. But this time, I didn't even question it. I just wanted peace. How much do you need?" $3,000. It was a lot of money, but I had it. I went to my bedroom, grabbed my checkbook, came back, and handed it to him. "Here. And Terence, I'm so sorry, truly. I never wanted this to happen." He took the check, folded it, and shoved it into his pocket. "If you were really sorry, you would have driven more carefully." They moved out a week later. They didn't give me the new address. They didn't say goodbye. They just packed their things and left. I was alone in that house again, but now the silence was different. It was heavy, suffocating. I tried calling Terence several times, but he didn't answer. I sent messages, no response. That's when I started to realize something was very wrong. A month after the accident, I got a call from a lawyer, a Mr. Patterson, with a formal and direct voice. "Mrs. Helen Carter." "Yes, this is she." "You are being sued for involuntary manslaughter and negligence. You need to hire a lawyer immediately." My world collapsed. Sued? By whom? "By your son, Terence Carter, and his wife, Vanessa Carter. They are alleging that you were driving recklessly and caused the death of their baby." I hung up the phone and collapsed onto the floor, crying. How could my own son do this to me? I called Joyce, desperate, and she rushed over. She helped me hire a lawyer, a man named Mr. Hughes, who had a good reputation in town. He took my case, reviewed the police report, the witnesses, everything. "Mrs. Carter, you are not at fault at all. The police report is clear. The other driver ran the red light at high speed. You were driving within the limit, wearing your seatbelt, everything by the book. This lawsuit has no basis. Then why is my son doing this to me? Mr. Hughes adjusted his glasses and looked at me seriously. Usually when a family files a lawsuit like this without grounds, there's something behind it. It could be anger, it could be money, it could be manipulation. Do you have assets? An inheritance? Property? I have the house and a good amount in investments and savings my husband left me. He nodded. That's what I thought. The months that followed were hell. The case moved forward, even without any evidence against me. Vanessa and Terrence hired an expensive lawyer, the kind you see on TV. And then the lies began. In the lawsuit, they claimed I was speeding, that I was distracted on my phone, that I had been drinking before leaving the house. All lies. But they produced false witnesses. A neighbor who swore she saw me drinking wine at 2 p.m, a friend of Terrence's who said I always drove dangerously, even a supposed mechanic who claimed my car had brake problems and that I never took it in for repairs. All made up, all coordinated. My lawyer challenged every lie, presented evidence, brought in the vehicle inspection report showing everything was in perfect condition. But the narrative they built was strong. Negligent mother, irresponsible old woman caused the death of her own grandchild. The local media picked up the story. It was in the newspaper, on TV. My name was dragged through the mud. At the school where I worked, people started looking at me differently. Some parents asked that I not have contact with their children. It was humiliating. I had to take a leave of absence because I couldn't take the gossip and judgmental stares anymore. The worst part was the hearing. I was there, sitting beside my lawyer, seeing my son and daughter-in-law on the other side of the courtroom. Vanessa cried during her testimony, said she lost her child because of my negligence, that I never liked her, that I was jealous of their marriage, that I deliberately drove dangerously because I wanted to get rid of her. Every word was a stab. And Terrence confirmed it all. He said I had always been a controlling mother, that I drank in secret, that I'd had emotional problems ever since his father died. I looked into his eyes as he told those lies and no longer recognized my son. When it was my turn to testify, I told the truth. I said I never drank, that I always drove carefully, that I loved my son and daughter-in-law despite everything, that I would never harm my grandchild. But the prosecutor attacked me. She made it seem like I was lying, like I was making excuses, like I was a bitter old woman who couldn't accept losing control over her son. It was humiliating, painful, and I felt like I was fighting a losing battle. At the end of the hearing, as I was leaving the courthouse, Vanessa walked past me and whispered softly, just so I could hear, "You never should have let us into your house, old woman. Now you're going to pay for everything." That's when I understood. This was never about the baby. It was about money. It was about destroying me and taking everything I had. The trial lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of torture, of hearing lies about me, of watching my son look at me as if I were a monster. My lawyer did everything he could. He presented the full police report, the vehicle inspection, and even managed to locate the driver of the other car who had caused the accident. But the man had fled the city, and no one could find him to testify. And without him, it was my word against theirs. Vanessa and Terrence's lawyer was good. I have to admit that. He built a narrative in which I was the villain, the bitter mother-in-law, the depressed widow who couldn't get over her husband's death and took it out on others. He painted Vanessa as an innocent victim, a young mother who lost her baby at the hands of a negligent woman. And the jury bought the story. I remember the day of the verdict like it was yesterday. It was a cloudy day, typical of November in Atlanta. I walked into the courtroom with my legs trembling, sat beside Mr. Hughes and waited. I looked to the side and saw Terrence holding Vanessa's hand, both of them serious, as if they were a grieving couple seeking justice. Did he really believe the lies he had told? Or did he know exactly what he was doing? When the judge asked whether the jury had reached a verdict, I felt my heart nearly leap out of my chest. Yes, Your Honor. In the case of the state versus Helen Marie Carter, what is the jury's verdict on the charge of involuntary manslaughter? Guilty? The world collapsed. I heard my sister Joyce sob behind me. I heard Mr. Hughes let out a heavy sigh. But I couldn't move. I just sat there, frozen, trying to process that I had been convicted of something I didn't do. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later, and I walked out of that courtroom a broken woman. Joyce took me to her house and wouldn't let me stay alone. But I could barely speak, barely eat. I just lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how I had ended up there. On the day of sentencing, the judge was merciless. He said I had acted negligently, that I had caused the death of an innocent child, that I needed to pay for my crime. He sentenced me to 5 years in prison. 5 years. When I heard that number, my legs nearly gave out. Mr. Hughes tried to appeal, but it was denied. I was handcuffed right there in front of everyone and taken to a holding cell. As they led me away, I looked back and saw Vanessa. She wasn't crying, she was smiling. A small, almost imperceptible smile, but it was there. And Terence, my son, my blood, was beside her, holding her, not even looking in my direction. In that moment, I knew they had planned everything from the very beginning, moving into my house, the pregnancy, the accident, the lawsuit. It was all calculated. And I, innocent and foolish, had fallen right into the trap. I was transferred to Pulaski State Prison, a women's penitentiary about 2 hours from Atlanta. When I arrived, they gave me an orange uniform, took my personal belongings, and put me in a cell with 3 other women. I didn't sleep that first night. I lay awake on that hard, narrow bed, listening to the sounds of the prison, women crying, screaming, talking, guards walking the corridors, doors slamming. Everything was noise, harsh, aggressive, terrifying. I was 59 years old, had never even had a traffic ticket in my life, and now I was in prison for involuntary manslaughter. In the first few days, I cried a lot. I cried for the injustice, for the pain, for the betrayal. I cried for my grandchild I never met, for my son who sold me out, for the life I had lost. But after a week, the tears dried up, and in place of sadness came anger, a cold, deep anger that grew inside me like a poisonous plant. I had been too innocent. I had trusted too much. I had loved too much. And look where it got me. 2 months into my sentence, I received notice that I had visitors. I thought it was Joyce, who had promised to visit me every week. But when I walked into the visitation room and saw who was there, my stomach twisted. It was Terence and Vanessa. I stood frozen in the doorway, not knowing whether to go in or turn back. But the guard gently nudged me. "Go on, you've got 20 minutes. I sat down in the chair on the other side of the glass table and looked at them. Terence looked different. He had gained weight, was wearing expensive clothes, a new watch on his wrist. Vanessa, too, fully done up, gold earrings, a designer purse. "Hi, Mom," Terence said, with no emotion in his voice. I didn't respond, I just stared. "We came because there are some papers you need to sign." Vanessa placed an envelope on the table and slid it toward me. "What papers are these?" "House documents. We need you to transfer the property into my name. It's to make things easier, you know, while you're indisposed." Indisposed. As if I were at a spa, not in prison. I picked up the envelope, opened it, and read the documents. It was a complete transfer of my house, my investments, everything I owned into Terence's name. "You're out of your minds if you think I'm signing this." Vanessa sighed, impatient. "Miss Helen, you're going to be here for 5 years. During that time, Someone has to take care of the house, pay the bills, keep everything running. It's better to transfer it to Terence. He is your son, than to let everything fall apart, don't you think? I'd rather see the house burn down than give it to you. Terence leaned forward, his face tense. Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be. You owe me this. You killed my son. I didn't kill anyone, and you know that perfectly well. The two of you set all of this up to get me out of the way and take my money. But I'm not signing anything. I stood up, threw the envelope back onto the table, and called the guard. I want to go back to my cell. As they led me away, I heard Vanessa shout, "You're going to regret this, stubborn old woman. You're going to rot in here." After that visit, I made a decision. I would never receive visits from them again, and I would never receive visits from anyone. Not even Joyce, who kept insisting on coming every week. I asked the prison administration to block all visitation requests. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to hear words of comfort. I didn't want pity. I wanted to be alone with my anger and to plan, because if there was one thing I had learned in those months of hell, it was that kindness gets you nowhere. They thought they were going to break me. They thought I'd come out of there a defeated old woman with nothing left, ready to disappear. But they were wrong. I had 5 years ahead of me. 5 years to think, to grow stronger, to prepare. And when I walked out of that place, they would find out what kind of woman I really was. The Helen Carter who entered that prison in 2019 was not the same one who would leave in 2024. That innocent, all-loving Helen who only wanted to please everyone had died in the courtroom. The one who would walk out was someone else entirely, and she was hungry for justice. The first months in prison were the hardest. I had to learn how to survive in an environment I never imagined I'd know. The other inmates tested me, trying to see if I was weak, if I was an easy target. But I learned fast. I kept my head down, stayed out of trouble, but I also didn't let anyone walk all over me. One of my cellmates was a woman named Diane, 52 years old, imprisoned for financial fraud. She had been an accountant and had embezzled money from the company where she worked to pay off her ex-husband's debts. She was the one who taught me the unwritten rules of prison. In here, you don't fully trust anyone. You show respect, but you don't expose yourself. And you use this time for something useful, or you'll go crazy. I followed her advice. I started working in the prison library, organizing books, helping other inmates with reading. I began using my free hours to study. I read about law, criminal proceedings, legal appeals. I wanted to understand every detail of the system that had condemned me. At night, when the lights went out, I stayed awake thinking about Terence, about Vanessa, about everything that had happened. And the more I thought, the more the pieces started to fit together. In my first year in prison, Joyce finally managed to convince me to accept a visit from her. I had blocked everyone, but she insisted so much through letters that I eventually gave in. When she walked into the visitation room, she started crying before she even sat down. "Helen, my sister, look what they did to you." "Stop crying, Joyce, I'm fine." "Fine, you're in prison, Helen, for a crime you didn't commit." I held her hand across the table. "I know that, you know that, but crying won't change anything. Tell me what's going on out there." Joyce wiped her tears and took a deep breath. "Terence and Vanessa moved into your house." I felt a stab in my chest, but I didn't show it. And they're living there like they own the place. They remodeled everything, took out your things, Robert's photos. Vanessa posted pictures online, all proud of their new house. They didn't manage to make me sign the transfer. Technically, the house is still mine. Yes, but Helen, they're there. And you're here. The lawyer said that after 5 years, if you don't object, they can claim adverse possession or argue abandonment of property. That lit a fire inside me. I want you to do something for me. Hire someone to go there once in a while, take pictures, document everything they do to the house. I want proof, and I want you to make copies of all the house documents, Robert's inheritance, everything you can get from my safe. You still have access to the safe. I do. The code is Robert's birthday. Take everything that's in there and keep it somewhere safe. And Joyce, this is important. Don't tell anyone what you're doing. Not Terrence, not Vanessa, not anyone. It was Joyce who brought me the news. 6 months later, that changed everything. She arrived at the visit with a strange look on her face, somewhere between shocked and nervous. Helen, I found something out. And you need to sit down to hear this. I'm already sitting, Joyce. Just say it. Vanessa's pregnant again. I felt like someone had dumped a bucket of cold water over me. Pregnant? Yes. 3 months. Terrence announced it on Facebook, all happy, saying now they're going to have the child that was taken from them so cruelly. Anger rose like a hot wave. They were moving on with their lives, happy in my house, with my money, expecting a baby while I was rotting in a cell. There's more, Helen. What? Joyce hesitated. I hired that investigator you asked for to document the house. He found some strange things. What kind of things? Terrence is unemployed again. Vanessa doesn't work either, but they're spending money like it's raining. They remodeled the entire house, bought 2 new cars, they're always traveling, posting pictures at expensive restaurants. It doesn't add up, Helen. Where's that money coming from? I thought for a moment. They must have accessed my account somehow. No, I blocked everything when you were arrested. Remember, we changed the passwords. You signed a power of attorney just for me. They don't have legal access to your money. Then where's it coming from? Joyce leaned closer and whispered. The investigator thinks they received some kind of settlement, some financial agreement that was never disclosed. My mind started racing. Compensation from whom? I don't know yet, but he's investigating. 3 months later, Joyce came back with the bombshell. She walked into the visitation room with a folder full of documents and the look of someone who'd seen a ghost. Helen, brace yourself, because what I'm about to tell you is going to drive you crazy. She opened the folder and pulled out a paper. The investigator found out Vanessa and Terrence filed a civil lawsuit against the insurance company of the driver who caused the accident. The one who ran off, if remember? I remember. They won. They received a settlement of $350,000. I was stunned. How is that possible? I was the one driving. If anyone had a right to anything, it was me. Exactly. But they filed the lawsuit claiming loss of a child, emotional damages, psychological trauma, and since you were criminally convicted, it made it look like you were at fault. So the insurance company paid them, the real victims. I felt rage explode inside me. So they didn't just put me in prison, take my house, destroy my reputation, they also profited from it. There's more. The investigator found out Vanessa had a history of lawsuits. Before meeting Terrence, she sued an ex-boyfriend claiming assault, won money, and later it was discovered she'd forged the evidence. She sued a former employer claiming workplace harassment and got an out-of-court settlement. It's a pattern, Helen. This is what she does. She sets situations up, manipulates people, and makes money off it. Everything made sense now. The quick move into my house, the pregnancy, the accident, the lawsuit. It was all part of a plan. Vanessa had chosen Terrence because he was weak, easy to manipulate, and because I had assets. She had calculated every step, and my son, the boy I raised, had been so greedy and cowardly that he went along with her game. I spent the following years preparing myself. Joyce kept investigating, gathering evidence, documents, anything that could help me when I got out. I kept studying law, taking notes, building a plan. I befriended an inmate named Regina, who had been a lawyer before being imprisoned for contempt of court during a divorce fight. She taught me things no book ever would. Helen, the system is corrupt, but if you know how to play the game, you can flip the board. You just need solid evidence and the right person to represent you. She referred me to a lawyer in Atlanta, a man named Charles Wright, a specialist in overturning wrongful convictions. Joyce went to him, told my story, showed what we'd discovered about Vanessa. Mr. Wright agreed to take my case pro bono, saying it was exactly the kind of injustice he fought against. For 4 years, we worked behind the scenes, gathering evidence, preparing appeals, building a solid case. We discovered that one of the witnesses who lied at my trial, that friend of Terrence's, had been paid $5,000 by Vanessa. We discovered that the supposed mechanic who claimed my car had problems had never even seen my car in his life. We discovered that Vanessa had a pattern of fraudulent behavior going back to her teenage years. Every piece of evidence was ammunition I stored away for the day of my freedom. In December 2023, 6 months before my release, Mr. Wright secured a review hearing for my case. He presented all the new evidence, the documents proving Vanessa's fraud, the retracted testimony of the paid witness. The judge reviewed everything and agreed to reconsider my conviction. But the process was slow. Until the full review was completed, I would have to serve my sentence to the end. Mrs. Carter, unfortunately, the system doesn't move fast, Mr. Wright told me during a visit. But I guarantee that when you get out of here, we'll clear your name and we'll make those two pay for everything they did. I'm getting out in June. Do you think the review will be done by then? Maybe not. But I'll keep working. And when you get out, you'll have all the documentation you need to sue them back for fraud, for defamation, for everything. I smiled for the first time in years. I don't just want to sue them, Mr. Wright. I want to destroy them the same way they destroyed me. He nodded. And you will, because this time, the truth is on your side. The last months in prison were the easiest, because I knew every day that passed was one day closer to my revenge. I had become another person in there. I was no longer the kind, naive Helen who forgave everything. I was the Helen who had survived hell, and hell for hell, I was going to make sure they got a taste of exactly what I'd been through. June 15th, 2024 was the day I was reborn. After 5 years, 3 months, and 12 days, I walked out of that prison. When the gates opened and I saw the sunlight, Joyce waiting for me with the car, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. But it wasn't the naive hope Helen used to have. It was the sharp hope of someone who knows exactly what she wants and goes after it. Joyce hugged me, crying, but I didn't cry. Let's go, I said. We've got work to do. On the drive back to Atlanta, she caught me up on everything. Terrence and Vanessa had had a little girl, who was now 3 years old. They were still living in my house, still spending money like there was no tomorrow. And best of all, they thought they'd won. They thought I'd come out of prison broke, defeated, too worn out to fight. Mr. Wright managed to schedule the final review hearing for 2 months from now, Joyce said as she drove. He said the evidence is so strong it's basically a sure thing they'll overturn your conviction. And the case against them? It's ready. The second your conviction gets thrown out, we go after them full force. Fraud on the court, defamation, misappropriation, everything. The first thing I did when I got to Joyce's house was take a long shower. 5 years of timed showers, cold water, zero privacy. I stayed under that hot water for almost an hour, washing off not just the grime, but symbolically, that entire stretch of my life. When I got out, I looked at myself in the mirror. I was different, thinner, gray hair I'd stopped dyeing, deeper wrinkles around my eyes. But what had changed the most was my gaze. It was hard, determined. It was the look of a survivor. In the days that followed, I devoted myself to getting everything organized with Mr. Wright. We went through every document, every piece of evidence, every detail of the case. He'd done impeccable work. Mrs. Carter, you've got a solid case not only to vacate the conviction, but to have them criminally charged for fraud and perjury. And civilly, you can seek compensation for emotional distress, defamation, psychological suffering. We're talking big numbers. I don't just want the money, Mr. Wright. I want them to feel what I felt. I want real justice. 2 weeks after I got out, I did something I'd been planning for years. I borrowed Joyce's car and drove to my old house. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, beautiful, really. When I got to the street, I parked a few yards before it, just watching. My house had been completely renovated. The front was painted a modern gray, the windows had been replaced, and there was a brand new electric gate. In the garden Robert had loved so much, there were toys scattered everywhere. I saw Vanessa step out the front door with a little girl on her hip, their daughter. Vanessa was laughing, talking on the phone, all done up. She climbed into a shiny black SUV parked in the driveway, my driveway, and drove off. She didn't even notice me. I stayed there for a few more minutes, staring at the house. That house had been mine and Robert's. Every brick had been laid with our sweat, and now it was in the hands of 2 leeches who'd stolen everything from me. But not for much longer. I started the car and left. It wasn't time for a confrontation yet. Not yet. The review hearing happened on August 20th, 2024. I walked into that same courthouse where I'd been convicted, but this time it was different. This time I had the truth on my side. Mr. Wright presented all the evidence, the documents showing Vanessa's history of fraud, the confession from the witness who'd been paid to lie, the independent analysis confirming the crash had been caused by the other driver, not me, and the financial records showing the settlement money they'd received at my expense. The prosecutor, the same one who'd helped convict me 5 years earlier, tried to argue back, but there was no way around it. The evidence was crushing. When the judge brought the gavel down and declared, Helen Marie Carter's conviction is hereby vacated. The defendant is innocent of all charges. My legs nearly gave out. Joyce shouted with joy behind me. Mr. Wright squeezed my hand hard. But I didn't celebrate. I just looked toward the back of the courtroom, where Terence and Vanessa had been required to attend. His face was pale. Hers was red with rage. For the first time in 5 years, I saw fear in their eyes, and that felt better than any celebration. The very next day, we filed 3 cases, 1 criminal, accusing them of fraud on the court and perjury, 1 civil citation, seeking compensation for emotional distress, psychological suffering, defamation, and the loss of 5 years of my life, and 1 for eviction and repossession of my home. The news spread fast. The same media that had crucified me 5 years earlier now wanted to interview the innocent woman betrayed by her own son. I gave interviews to everyone. I told my story without sparing details. I showed my face, my name, and I made it crystal clear who the real criminals were. Within a week, Vanessa and Terence became the town's outcasts. They lost friends, family, dignity. But I wasn't done yet. The eviction moved quickly. With my conviction overturned and the proof of their fraud, the judge ordered them to leave my home within 30 days. When the process server went to deliver the notice, I went with him. I wanted to see their faces. Vanessa opened the door, saw me, and went white. What are you doing here? I came to take back what's mine. The officer handed over the papers and explained the situation. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. If you fail to do so, you will be removed with police assistance. Terence appeared behind her, holding their daughter. When he saw me, he lowered his head. He couldn't look me in the eye. Mom, can we talk? Now, I'm your mom. When you sent me to prison, Vanessa said that. Don't pin it on her. You chose this. You chose money over your own mother. Now deal with the consequences. Vanessa exploded. You think you're gonna win this? We're gonna fight. You're gonna lose. You already did. Accept it already. I turned my back and walked away. I felt the weight of 5 years slide off my shoulders. 30 days later, on the day of repossession, I came back with Joyce, Mr. Wright, an officer, and 2 police officers. The house was empty. They'd left in the middle of the night, taken whatever they could carry, and vanished. I walked in slowly, taking in every room. They'd destroyed everything. The walls Robert and I had painted together were full of holes. The floors were scratched up. They'd smashed the kitchen window. It was pure vandalism. But I didn't care, because that was just structure. Structure can be fixed. My house was back with me. The criminal case against them moved fast. With all the evidence, the prosecutor offered a deal. They would confess to the fraud, return part of the settlement money they'd illegally received, and take community service plus probation. It wasn't prison, but it was something. They took it because they knew if it went to trial, it would be worse. In the civil case, I was awarded $500,000 for emotional damages and defamation. They couldn't pay it all at once, so the court froze their assets, including the cars they'd bought with my money, and set it up so they'd pay monthly for the rest of their lives. On top of that, my record was completely cleared, and the state paid me $200,000 for wrongful conviction. 6 months after I got out, my life was rebuilt. I renovated the entire house, erasing every trace of them. I put Robert's photos back up, planted new flowers in the garden, painted the walls in colors I actually liked. I went back to work, not at the school because I couldn't stomach the gossip, but I opened a small home-based administrative consulting business. Joyce visited me every week, and we'd sit with coffee and talk about life. I went to therapy because 5 years of wrongful prison time leaves scars no amount of money can erase. But little by little, I healed. People ask me if I forgave Terence. The answer is no. Some things don't deserve forgiveness. He betrayed me in the worst possible way. He sold me out for money. He put me in prison knowing I was innocent. That's not a mistake. That's evil. And evil I don't forgive. I cut ties completely. I changed my will, removing him as an heir. When I die, everything I have goes to Joyce and her kids. Terence and Vanessa can figure it out. I heard they split up, that she left him when the money ran out, that he's living in a tiny apartment, working some random job, trying to pay off what he owes me. I don't feel sorry for him. Honestly, I feel a cold satisfaction. Today, at 64, I'm rebuilding my life. I'm not the Helen who went into prison. That woman died in there. I'm a stronger version, smarter, more careful. I learned that kindness without limits is stupidity. I learned that family isn't always blood. It's who stands by you when everything falls apart. I learned that justice takes time, but when it comes, it's sweet. Sometimes, when I'm sitting in my garden, looking at the flowers I planted, I think about everything I went through. 5 years lost. 5 years of humiliation, pain, loneliness. But I also think about what I gained. I gained strength. I gained clarity. I gained the certainty that I can survive anything. And I got my life back, my home back, my dignity back. If there's any woman reading this who's going through something similar, being manipulated, betrayed, used by her own family, I'll tell you this. Fight. Don't accept being a victim. Gather evidence, get help, and fight with everything you've got. Because justice may take time, but it exists. And when it comes, it's worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of despair. I'm living proof of that. I survived, and you can too.